Thank you, everybody, for coming out this morning. We want to do a few things this morning. We're obviously going to show some video that we've taken on some in-progress crimes, and also just to talk about where we are in video policing in the city of Fresno. Currently, we have 87 cameras that we have physically installed throughout the city of Fresno, and for each one of those signs, or each one of those cameras that are in place, we have an accompanying sign that you see here, and to let would-be thieves know that the area in which they're thinking about or contemplating committing a crime, that they are in fact not only being monitored, but actively monitored in many cases. We also have an additional 36 traffic cameras in the city that are networked to our system that we have the ability to monitor as well. And I think most of you know that during this last council session, there was $200,000 that has been set aside in a contingency. There are some things that we need to do in terms of putting on board a retired federal judge that will serve as the person who monitors our activity or audits what we are doing. And we anticipate that retired federal judge will be approved by council within the next 3 weeks or so. We have worked out all of the deal points that we needed to do with the judge, and so we anticipate bringing him on board here in the next 3 weeks. Once that occurs, there will be an additional $200,000 after the audit is complete, and that will allow us to place an additional 40 cameras, specifically in the southeast and in the northeast policing districts. And I want to call to your attention, there's a map over here on the wall. And the blue areas are spheres, and those spheres represent where we have the capability today of placing wireless cameras. The pink circle is a sphere that will be put into place once the additional $200,000 is placed into our budget. So you can see, based on the spheres before you, that we have the ability to cover probably about 70% of our city with cameras. And that's important because whenever we identify a spike in crime or a crime trend, or what we had here this last month was a serious crime that occurred in southeast Fresno, we were able to, within a 24-hour period, put a wireless camera in that neighborhood for the purposes of not only deterring additional criminal activity, but being able to capture any type of suspicious activity that we thought might be involved in that previous crime or in any future crimes. So that is important to us. The other thing that occurred in the last month or so is that we have actually started to actively monitor our cameras that are in place. We have done that by hiring 9 police cadets. Nicole Waltrip is one of those cadets assigned to the video policing unit. The unit is staffed 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and the cadets have gone through a training program over the last 30 days that has allowed them to understand truly where the cameras are, what the suspicious activity to look for, how to communicate that information to our officers, as well as some of the safeguards that we've put in place to ensure that there are no abuses of our video policing cameras. And the active monitoring over the past month has been very beneficial to us. Prior to the active monitoring, what we had was cameras that were in place that had a default location, meaning that they were only able to look at one specific location unless someone moved them. Active monitoring allows us to take full advantage of the technology that is in place, in the fact that we can utilize the panning capability of that camera, the tilt capability, and the zooming in, which you're going to see in one of the cases of active monitoring how that played out. And so what it allows us to do is that when we know individuals are suspicious and we want to follow their movement, we can track them via the cameras. Or if we do see something that appears to be a criminal act and we want to identify that individual, we can zoom in and capture their facial features, which allows us to successfully prosecute that individual in court. And so that is something that we are going to roll out today. And so I want to give you examples of 3 cases. and after I identify the case, each one of these, then we'll show it up on the screen. And one of them is going to be a stabbing that occurred. You'll actually see the stabbing, not a close-up of the stabbing, because at that time we were not actually actively monitoring it, but you'll also see our officers arrive when the suspect is lying on the ground stabbed. And then we also have a graffiti or a tagging in progress with two individuals, and you're going to see the capability of this camera when the active monitoring occurred, that they actually zoomed in and the facial feature is incredibly clear. And then another one was what we refer to as a beat-down robbery or a street robbery that occurred of a homeless individual or a street person, and we'll be able to show you the tracking of those suspects out of the area until officers were directed into their location. The first one, on Monday morning, September 22nd at around 12 a.m., a 52-year-old Gregory Bonner, a homeless man, was walking in the downtown area known as Chinatown. While walking through the Chinatown area, Bonner was confronted by an unknown female. This female walked up to Bonner and without provocation threatened to harm him. The female who threatened Bonner was later identified as 41-year-old Kimberly Harris. Harris is currently a street person in the city of Fresno. After threatening Bonner, Harris stabbed Bonner with a knife, causing a minor wound to his chest. To prevent being stabbed again, Bonner fled from the female and the Chinatown area. Bonner believed that the injury he received from being stabbed was minor and decided at that time not to notify the police department of what had occurred and to not seek medical attention. Bonner did not know Harris, had never had any prior contact with Harris, and did not know why Harris would stab him. Bonner walked to the Family Express liquor store located on the southeast corner of Fresno and B Street, which is where one of our cameras are placed. And just after 12:30 a.m., Bonner was standing in the parking lot of the Family Express liquor store speaking to one of the friends, and during this time Harris approached Bonner from behind. Bonner turned around and was standing face to face with Harris. As Harris and Bonner faced each other, Harris stated, "I could have taken your life earlier." Bonner and Harris began arguing during the argument. Harris took out a knife from her pants pocket, then punched Bonner while holding the knife. Bonner fell to the ground after being struck by Harris. While on the ground, Harris struck Bonner 3 more times as he attempted to pick up himself from the ground. And despite being struck, Bonner picked himself up from the ground and was able to punch Harris. And then Bonner then attempted to run away from Harris. And as Bonner ran away, Harris ran after him and stabbed him 1 time in his back with her knife. Bonner ran in a northbound direction from the parking lot as Harris fled southbound. And as a result of being stabbed, he fell onto a grassy area in the parking lot. And while he was on the ground, Harris returned to the parking lot, stood over him, and while he laid there, she yelled at him, ultimately went through his pockets and kicked him. And then after kicking Bonner, Harris calmly walked away from Bonner. Officers were guided in after the cadets monitored this activity, and ultimately the officers came in and was able to not only get emergency equipment to the scene to assist with the person that had been stabbed, but ultimately to be able to identify the individual, which was she was taken into custody at that time. You have independent witnesses that identified him, but we can see that the video will allow us to successfully prosecute this case and to demonstrate that in fact she was the aggressor, and that there was no provocation truly upon him being stabbed, because he was actually running away from her when she stabbed him. And that is going to be very good for prosecution purposes. The video camera at that location, even though it was set in a default position, allowed us to capture the actual disturbance between the victim and the suspect, but also allowed us to be able to show in a court of law that this female was in fact the aggressor, that she was not in essence defending herself and was aggressively attacking the victim in this case. And that assists us in a successful prosecution, and I'll talk about it time and time again. It frees up our investigators as well as frees up prosecutors as they prosecute this case.